Hello, so in this video I'm talking to Dr. Ralph Norman, a colleague at Canterbury Christ Church University. We're talking about the idea of the common good. We make reference to the fact that we've got a new MA called Religion and the Common Good. You can click a link to that in the information below. We make reference to Sandel's thinking around it, and there's a link to one of his talks on that, and an essay that Ralph has written exploring some of the thinkers and ideas that have gone on to shape and really inform the common good over the last century and a half or so. So we hope you find it interesting and illuminating. We think it's got some currency for the predicament in the modern world. Without further ado, here's the interview. So, hello, Ralph, Dr. Ralph Norman. Ralph, can you just say a little bit about who you are? And you're at Canterbury Christ Church University, that's right, with me, you're one of my colleagues. But just for our listeners, what do you do at the university?
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Of course, we're friends, we're colleagues. We've been working together closely for a long time in a spirit of cooperation. But unlike yourself, Bob, I'm primarily interested in theology and religious studies. I'm subject lead for theology and religious studies here at Canterbury Christ Church University, where we have the BA programmes running along those lines, and been here a long time, very fruitfully. Wonderful place to be.
Great, thanks. And we're talking about the common good. We've had a conversation that's been going on for some time, and we've been developing a new MA called Religion and the Common Good, and we're going to talk a little bit about that now. Sort of a bit of context. The common good sort of has popped up. Sandel in his Reef lectures in 2009 said something. I've got it on the screen. We need to reframe the terms of political argument, the need for a public debate on the moral limits of markets, a more robust political discourse which connects with moral and even spiritual questions. And that conversation has been sort of continued. I know that just in February of last year, Anna Rowlands had a conversation about what actually is the common good, which is on the Theos website, and I'll put the links underneath this.
Yeah, it was actually this year. It's very current.
Oh,
yeah.
It's this year. It's a really it's an interesting idea. So Ralph, what is the common good, and where's it come from?
The common good seems to be all over the place at the moment. I mean, as you say, sort of Michael Sandel is a very high profile political philosopher, as you know. He's got a communitarian background. He's interested in communities and how politically people like to be together in communities. And so back in 2009, that of course was just after the financial crash, and it was look, is everything in politics about economics, or is it about anything else? It's very interesting that when Sandel wanted to give his vision of what the alternative to that is, this language of the common good comes up, this language of the common good. And I think it's a way really of us saying, when we do politics, we want morality to be in there. It's very interesting he uses the word spiritual as well. He's obviously thinking in terms of a religious space in public discourse as well. So why the common good? I think if you're trying to tell people what the good is, what the social good is, you sound like you've got the answers and you know what's right for everyone else as well. The common good, I think, is doing something quite different, because it's opening up a conversation about what we share. It's great for thinking about collaboration, and it's actually great for thinking about how we want to talk about morality together, identifying areas of shared concern, and using that to try and not say this is my moral vision of how society ought to be and how you should live your life, but actually is coming together around the table and saying, well, I'm sure that we all have a vision of the good life. Where does it overlap? What can we actually work on to do something that's good? So it's very collaborative, and it means it is quite current. There it was in Sandel. Of course, it's being picked up increasingly in sort of government reports. It's part of our current language, but it has a long history, and that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you've written a piece on the website Together for the Common Good, a sort of an essay introducing something of the history. So this idea has it's alive at the moment, but it actually has a bit of parentage. So where do you think is an interesting place to begin the story of I don't know, common good in British sort of intellectual life? Where would you start?
Well, there's a long lineage actually. There's a kind of question because lots of people you'll find saying it's got something to do with Aristotle. Of course, it's one of those puzzling things because it's how Aristotle tends to be translated into English. So there's a kind of interesting sort of thing going on there. But we do know that one of Aristotle's ethical ideas is based around friendship, that we're not just isolated individuals. And he has a word used for fellowship broadly, which is koinonia, which of course is also a New Testament word concerned with fellowship. So there's both those sort of Greek philosophical roots and New Testament roots about what it is to come together freely, not because you're forced to, not because you have to, but because you freely will to come together to do something for the common good. Now, there's key differences here because, of course, Aristotle in ancient Athens, that's a slave-owning society, and of course, there's big differences in status between men and women and insiders to the society and outsiders, and there's all sorts of things about Aristotle's vision that I'm sure that we would want to question, and rightly so. So what's happened with that Aristotelian route? Well, it did sort of get drawn into Christian ideas of community. One of the high points of that, of course, is with Thomas Aquinas, and Thomas Aquinas does use Latin equivalents of this English phrase common good. He thinks that when we come together to join a society, it ought to be with an eye on the common good, because people do want to do good for each other. It's not as if we're just like Thomas Hobbes and we're kind of a bit fearful of treading on, what we might do to each other, and we sort of come into some sort of social contract agreement just to try and keep the peace. No, actually, there's a kind of, the motivation isn't fear. The motivation is actually the fact that we do will good for other people.
A positive idea of human possibility then.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not as if we're just trying to sort of police, set limits on where I don't infringe your private property rights, but we've got a sort of bigger vision. We might disagree about it in all sorts of different ways, but we all share this motivation, or that's the insight. That's Thomas Aquinas's insight. We all at least ought to share this motivation to will the good for everyone, goodwill. Very, very simple idea, and I think a very, very attractive idea as well.
Yeah. So do you sort of consciously see it as a kind of an alternative to the more polarizing situations that we found in recent times? Do you think the common good is an attempt to counter that sort of polarization?
Absolutely, and I think that when you look at how it's picked up in modern political thinking, that really is crucial. I've mentioned Hobbes already, who of course is a sort of 17th century thinker. By the time we move,
and there's quite a lot of polarization going on at that time.
It's a civil war, right. Oliver Cromwell and all of that. By the time we get to the 19th century, of course, Britain is kind of slowly moving towards what we would now recognise as the open society, the open democratic society, and some of those accounts of Victorian liberalism. I'm thinking of John Stuart Mill. We all know about Mill's utilitarianism, of course, but also his works on liberalism, on liberty, on freedom of speech. Well, Mill's basic vision of freedom is that you should be left alone. You shouldn't be interfered with. It's a kind of negative freedom. No one should encroach on my space. But that does sort of then lead to this idea of the isolated individual. And that was one of the key concerns that the Victorians had. And that's where, in contrast to Mill, one of the key architects of the common good is a Victorian philosopher called Thomas Hill Green, T.H. Green, who in a number of works in the late 1870s, early 1880s, you can see him reacting against Mill and trying to develop an idea of positive freedom, thinking about human flourishing, thinking about the good life, but offering also a kind of corrective to Aristotle by extending this vision to everyone universally, not just the Aristotelian elite, not just the aristocrats, but to everyone. And so it becomes a sort of key vision of democratic citizenship in Green's own thought. And I am very, very excited about Green because what you see in Green actually is someone who takes these words common good and repeats them and repeats them and repeats them, and you get the sense that he's really trying to teach Victorian society something about not just being isolated individuals, but something more like a sort of religion of citizenship, really, where yes, and it's not as if he's going to say this is what you must all do. You know, people can realise the common good in different ways in their own contexts. You're not going to say this is what you have to do to lead the good life, because you have to kind of work it out for yourself in your own context. The key thing is actually having goodwill, some sort of ideal that when we enter into these shared conversations about, well, what do we think our common good is, that we are doing so genuinely with goodwill, with an eye on the ideal that actually this is going somewhere. We might achieve something at the end of it. Fantastically compelling idea.
Yeah. So if I get it straight, if Mill is kind of reacting to try and protect individuals from either hostile governments or hostile crowds that want to, and therefore sort of, you've got this sense of sort of isolated communities where you're allowed to be what you are, but that's because you've got these threats around you. Then trying to shift towards a cooperative, positive vision where there can be a better conversation. So it's actually got quite ambitious intentions for society. This is it's a as you say, it's a kind of a vision of the kind of country, kind of society, kind of community that there could be.
Absolutely. And one of the really, really exciting things about Mill as well, sorry, not Mill, but Green, one of the really exciting things about Green's vision is that it's actually quite successful. It changes things in Victorian society. He influences lots and lots of different people. So, sort of after Green, you find other people using this phrase, the common good, a lot, with reference to citizenship. And some of the key figures who get influenced by him with this more sort of citizenship type thinking, that there's people like Arnold Toynbee, the economic historian, the guy who's responsible for that phrase industrial revolution that we use often, but also economists like Alfred Marshall, social theorists like L.T. Hobhouse, Asquith, the Liberal Prime Minister, but also some key other names like William Beveridge. You remember the Beveridge Report, the foundation of the welfare state. R.H. Tawney, the key sort of political thinker. Someone called Clement Attlee as well, who was also sort of at one of these institutions that was shaped in Green's citizenship image. But it is also interesting how, because they're trying to share a vision, share a conversation, open up a conversation, I think it's really important to think about in educational terms as well. Is that lots of Green's followers then go and set up our regional universities, our civic universities. So, for instance, Lord Haldane is the Lord Chancellor who helps found the London School of Economics and Imperial College London. For a while, he's also Chancellor of the University of Bristol when Bristol is just being set up. He's also Chancellor of the University of St Andrews up in Scotland. H.A.L. Fisher is a Liberal politician who moves from that to being the Vice Chancellor of Sheffield University when Sheffield University is being set up. Michael Sadler becomes VC of Leeds. Sandy Lindsay sets up the University of Kiel. And what's really interesting about all of these, you see, is that you can see that what starts off as a set of philosophical ideas about citizenship at Oxford, they go, what are we going to do about this? We need to take it out in the regions. We need to open up universities across the nation, give people opportunities, spaces to come and discuss the common good. So it was really successful. If you look at the insights and motivations which went into founding so many of our Russell Group and Red Brick universities, come straight out of Green. And of course it filters also into what's happening in schools at the time as well, the motivations for trying to educate lots of people.
So you think that this idea becomes operationalized in the creation and the development of our public and civic institutions, and it moves from the philosophers and the books and the theories into, well, kind of public Britain as we know it today, or civic Britain as we know it today.
Absolutely. I can give you a couple of examples of that. So Sandy Lindsay, who goes and sets up the University of Kiel, he writes about the common good, but when he's asked about what's a university for, this is what he says: if we are going to try to keep a democratic country and maintain understanding of one another, we have to send out people from our universities who can do the technical stuff and who at the same time have an understanding of the political and social problems and the values that lie behind them. You know, there's a real sense of the civic university, the university serving the needs of citizens, sending out intelligent citizens to improve the quality of the debates which shape our society. Of course universities are there to give people training and to get people into employment, and these are key ways of improving things, but also to be able to handle conversations where people have different points of view, but to do it with goodwill. That's the key thing. You can also see it reflected really quite strongly, I think, in things like the 1944 Education Act. Do you remember the Butler Education Act? Very, very important for religious education, RE in particular, of course. At the time, you know, sort of Churchill is saying, look, what's so important here? Give Churchill three things to say about schools, and RE is one of them. RE must always be in our schools. That's what Churchill says. And I think it's because RE itself is connected with ideas of citizenship at the time. But you look at the fine grain of the way that Butler expresses himself in the debates leading up to the 1944 Education Act. These ideas of a kind of civic religion, very, 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 very important. But and although I'm conscious that people have got kind of dismissive of that idea, actually that there's something which was really quite compelling about what they were trying to do and what their motivations were. And I know we can't turn the clocks back. It's different now to where, but actually, could we not bring some more of this into how we think about RE and how we think about being a university, how we think about the debates that shape our societies? One of the beautiful things about RE, of course, you've got people coming together with really different perspectives, really different values, and they have to kind of learn how to have the conversation together.
And this comes back to
work together.
This comes back to that ancient idea of the sort of the sharing, the community, the fellowship of people who come together in conversation and dialogue with one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, you're obviously very passionate about this, and I know we're gonna try to have sort of other conversations, but you're really you know what you're saying now, and to me right now is you know, actually maybe this is a tradition that we should focus on, we should be thinking about, and we should be learning more about, because it's not only in the history of ideas, of either, I don't know, Western thought or our country's history, but it's actually something that maybe has something to offer some of our present challenges.
I think so, absolutely. And I think one of the key things where you can say, well, how, you know, if it's going to help our present challenges, is it because people are already gravitating towards it? And I think quite clearly, yes, they are. And I can give some examples of that as well. And it's not just, for instance, that, you know, the Theos think tank is interested, but actually the common good is also a key theme in Catholic social teaching.
Yeah.
If you look at papal documents, if you listen to the way the Pope speaks, the common good is a phrase. The common good is also this key idea in Catholic social teaching. It seems to come in, you know, sort of after the Greenian moment, if I can put it that way, and become the key theme where actually the churches are finding this is a way where you can say, well, that this is the religious truth that we witness to, but part of that religious truth we witness to is to have goodwill for all and to work for the common good. This is the sort of conversation about the common good that we want to have. So you'll see that within Roman Catholic teaching, the common good is an absolutely key theme. The Anglicans have kind of rediscovered it under the influence of Catholic social teaching. There's some wonderful books by the late and lamented Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs, Jonathan Sachs, where he's got Jewish insights into the common good, which actually, if you read him carefully, you see reflect biblical ideas of covenant. And it takes the Chief Rabbi, the late Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, to really sort of draw out the sort of covenantal coming together elements of common good thinking. But you'll also find Muslim writers on the common good, and also secular writers like Michael Sandel saying common good, but also spiritual values. It's very interesting. There's a coming together here.
Yeah, and I'm also very struck often from our students and also from work I do with school students that you know, that there's a lot of concern and anxiety amongst that cohort about some of the current trends in social and political discourse, the social media kind of frenzies that can happen. There's quite I mean, there is a sort of a bit of a kind of Hobbesian context here. They seem to be experiencing, but there's also an appetite there also seems to be, at least in my experience, I was just thinking about some of the first years that I've been talking to on our Introduction to Ethics course, you know, this year, that you know, there seems to be a real hunger for something better than that kind of argument, than that kind of sort of binary, and maybe young people are kind of, you know, have discovered the possibility that there could be a more positive sharing, sitting around the table, than perhaps what the social media platforms may offer them.
That's the hope, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the hope. Yeah,
I think we'd need a whole other session to talk about.
I think so. Well, look, yeah, I think that's a fascinating introduction, and I look forward to following up with another one, and we'll put loads of links to some of the things that we've talked about in the text below. Thanks very much, Ralph, for this morning, and I hope you have a good day with all the teaching I know that you've got coming up.
Wonderful. It's been a pleasure. Thanks,
Cheers.
Bob.
Great.